Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on our Oracle webinar this morning. This is part one of our procuring and effectively managing your Oracle estate. We have part two and also a third on Oracle in the virtualized environment also to come along over the coming months. Joined today by Robert Lamb, who's the head of our Oracle practice. My name's David Bloxham, the UK marketing manager. Before we go into today's session, a few housekeeping rules. As you may have noticed as you joined the call, we've all been set on mute. This to ensure that the sound quality remains at an optimum. We do, however, encourage questions and contributions through the session, so please use the chat box facility or the question box on your panel to send us your questions, and we have time at the end of the webinar to address those. So please do engage with us and send us your questions as we go through today's session. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Rob, who'll take over.
Thank you, David. Morning, everybody. As David mentioned, it's part one. It's really aimed at people who are new to Oracle or have just had Oracle landed in their lap in terms of managing Oracle estate as part of their business. Hopefully we can shed some light on the Oracle world for you. We won't go into too much detail. We'll cover that in part two. But just to give you a flavour of what we're going to cover this morning, we'll look at, just briefly, I noticed there's a couple of people, there's always new people on the call, so just a few words about software one, very briefly. We'll look at the challenges of Oracle software licensing, why it's so difficult to manage, and then a typical hot subject for many of our clients nowadays is the Oracle audit, preparations for the audit, why it might be precipitated, and then just finally a few words on managing and taking control, again at the high level. So just give you some starters and understanding about the Oracle world. So in terms of software one, our key message now to our clients globally is around SPM, which is looking at the pillars of the technology industry, which could be SAM, procurement, technology roadmap, and building a portfolio of management for our clients. And I think it's enably summed up in the last paragraph there, in that a software portfolio management service ensures that you're going to maximise your IT investments in your software assets. And as part of that process is to drive innovation. So we have teams globally in SAM and cloud services and technology roadmap and license expertise to deliver these to your company. In terms of the metrics of our company, we go back to 1985, now turning over $3.5 billion globally, and we're Oracle and Microsoft's largest and fastest growing partners. Slightly old, this slide. I know we're the other side of 50,000 contracts now globally. I don't know the exact number, but it's obviously a substantial amount. And outside our 6 key vendors, including Oracle, we manage around about 1,900 portfolios, so we cover a wide range of products for our clients. So the meat of the webinar today is around software licensing, and particularly Oracle. And if you're dealing with Oracle, which I presume you are because you're on the webinar, that you'll probably have a pretty jaundiced view of engaging with Oracle. It tends to be the way. I mean, it's no different from many vendors. They're there to sell the products. I mean, Oracle's a great product, but why is it so difficult to manage? And it's not necessarily down to Oracle being difficult. I mean, if you go back to 1984, when Oracle first appeared on the market in terms of the database, it's pretty simple. We had a database, so the terms and conditions around the database would be simple as well. But as time's gone on over the last 30-odd years, Oracle's acquired more products, it's developed products, it's acquired products. Particularly over the last few years, it's acquired a huge amount of cloud delivery capability. And this leads to the requirement to re-orchestrate their engagement and their terms and conditions and license terms and conditions as well. It's a major problem for clients because the terms and conditions that appear when you buy a set of Oracle products could be radically different 4 or 5 years later. And this provides challenges for managing the product in terms of compliance. And we cover that in a bit more detail in part two, but you've probably already maybe met some of these challenges yourselves. So what's the consequences of managing your products correctly, well, a couple of years old, these quotes, but absolutely still valid today. The chances are, whether you're a gardener or a forest, that you're looking at the market, that you're going to get audited. And I think these, from our experience globally, I mean, particularly in EMEA, we're seeing potentially around about 1 in 3 of our clients getting a review process from Oracle. The target is on a 3-yearly basis. If you don't manage your products correctly, they're likely to be back every 2 years. They're quite aware that the disorganised client is going to be richer for pickings. And it's particularly aimed from an Oracle perspective at the data centre. And you can imagine that with the global reach now of data centres and the complexities of licensing while moving your assets globally, this creates challenges for the client and opportunities for the vendor. So I think Gartner and Forrester are pretty well on the ball in terms of their assessment of what the client's going to face. So in terms of Oracle licenses, this is a very simplified view of how it pans out. Many of the customers are aware of the database products. We talk about middleware, which I'll refer to later, and in that area we get things like Internet Application Server. Less common a couple of years ago, but now pretty common amongst Oracle clients is the WebLogic suite, which is an acquisition, and of course then there's applications. So depending on which side of the fence you sit on, whether it's business or infrastructure, you might be aware more or less of one of these particular stacks. We don't cover the hardware so much, but you have to be aware as well that Oracle has got the infrastructure products based on the hardware, which is the acquisition as such. So this is a very simplified list because actually there's probably in the region of 3,500 to 4,000 products within the product portfolio, which is pretty challenging in itself in terms of understanding what you might have in your estate. What makes it more challenging, that if you look at it from the IT perspective, it would, in a very simple world, look something like this. So we have an IT view of the world, which could be global data centers or even localized data centers across various locales, a whole range of delivery capability, a whole range of products. So how do we match those to our listing of Oracle products that appear on our support contract renewals? Well, the answer is it's with great difficulty. So let's look at the detail of why it's so difficult to manage from this perspective. Well, we talked about the procurement view, which is simply a list of Oracle products. The difficulty that our clients face here is license agreements. So those who've been around the Oracle world a wee bit longer will come across the Oracle License and Service Agreement, which has recently been changed to OMA, Oracle Master Agreement, and we cover these in more detail in part 2. But these license agreements might change as you procure the product. So you get the situation that if you bought a piece of Oracle software in 2005, on your support renewal it would be described exactly the same if you purchased it in 2012 or 2014, but the differentiator is going to be in the license agreement. And it will also be differentiated on the contract. So you can be looking at exactly the same product description, but the license usage rights are completely dependent on the license agreement, the contractual terms attached to that purchase. So when we get into sort of the deeper realms of the products stack, we also have things which are called prerequisites and dependencies. So we looked at something like the WebLogic suite, which you might have. That gives you the capabilities to run Internet Application Server. With an Internet Application Server, you've got prerequisites to be able to, you've got dependencies and prerequisites, which allows you to run restricted use licenses. And if you get down just purely to the database level, if you've got a diagnostics, then the dependency would be a tuning pack. not all very, very clear what you should have. So if you're a procurement point of view, you're very dependent on IT. And from an IT point of view, you're very, very dependent on procurement doing their job. So matching the two sides of the proverbial coin is very difficult. The other issues which come into Oracle are technical ones. It's very easy, I'll show this again in part 2, to download software. It's very important to tick the right boxes when you're downloading the software. It's quite common amongst our clients that software is downloaded and installed without any knowledge of the license rights that have been granted through the procurement process. It's a tricky subject for an audit which might come along later, but we would always recommend that if you've got an installed base of Oracle, you get your DBAs to do constant reviews of what the software is installed and try and match it to your actual procurement. Contractors are a big issue here in that the implementation of a maybe test and development system could be carried out without any knowledge of the procurement process. You know that you've got rights to use the database, but can you spin it up on another machine? Would a contractor ask too many questions? I don't want to blacken them, but it would be, from experience, not always a question that is asked very clearly. And even if it is managed, the infrastructure changes that then impact on the licensing rules, which have been more predominant over the last sort of 6 and 7 years, would also affect your licenses. So if you do a simple thing like purely refresh your technology architecture, increase the cores of the system. Most vendors now in Oracle are clearly first to the market here. Increasing the number of cores increases your license requirements. So still provisioning the same number of people, you maybe still provisioning the same application, you've increased the power of your machine to make it more efficient, but there's a license impact. And then just purely managing your software estate is an issue which creates problems for our clients in terms of technical, and this is pretty attached to the procurement. If you've got a piece of software which is purely described on 2 separate documents as the same thing, how do you know your usage rights? And a good example that we often quote here is that in early 2000s it was quite common to use 10 nuts per processor as a minimum for test and development in some of the larger businesses, and that is not the same as 25 nuts, which is standard metric for a processor. Only by looking at the contracts would you understand that. You would have no knowledge by looking at what's actually installed on the machine. It would be impossible to tell by looking at the machine what your usage rights are for that particular software. So in terms of estate management, I can find out what I've got, but again, we have to go back to the documents. Of course, there's always Oracle themselves. Where, I like to put up front that the constant changes of the agreements, which I think is slowing down a wee bit now, but were very prevalent over the last sort of 2 to 5 years. That's not necessarily Oracle being difficult. It is marketplaces, but it does create a huge problem for the client. Not least is that because the Oracle sales reps tend to be in siloed areas, then they're not going to know the full extent of the product stack, they're not going to know the full extent of the rules necessarily, and they might not be up to date with the business practices. Now, it's a pretty challenging aspect for most of our global experts to keep up with what's going on, and we're focused on this as a job. So as it's part of your job as a salesperson, where you might be focused on solutions, it's going to be difficult to necessarily be up to speed and possibly be giving the customer the best advice in the circumstances. I think this is reflected in the issues that all vendors will face as the salespeople change, the account engagement. Again, the salesperson will be doing the same as yourself, looking at the list of installed base. It might not be necessarily obvious until you go to the contracts what special terms and conditions you have in terms of going forward. And they're going to look at that for their particular focused area. But again, one of the common things that we often get is, it's just Oracle. But that's no different to many vendors as far as I see. So what are the consequences? Well, all of this leads to drifting non-compliance, usually either due to lack of awareness of what the impact might be for moving your license around or refreshing machines, or the fact that you're assuming that you've got usage rights that you haven't because of the terms and conditions. There's obviously a huge commercial advantage to centralising your Oracle spend, and if you're not doing that, the consequences are that you're going to get your terms and conditions diluted by multiple sourcing. Most common one that we come across is lack of worldwide usage, and the consequences of that is that you might have all the licenses you require to make your server estate compliant, but if you haven't got grants of worldwide usage and you've moved your server estate from the US to the UK, you could find that Oracle are asking you for money for moving those licenses. And as with any situation where you've not got full control over your licenses, you can't maximise and sweat those assets to the best of what you wish to achieve to get the returns from your initial investment. So duplication of assets, I needn't say more on that. And the biggest consequence of all of this, if you are duplicating your assets and you are not sweating them enough, is that you overspend on support and maintenance. Come on to that slightly later in this thing, but support and maintenance at 22% of your initial investment is a large amount of money over 5 years. You're effectively buying it again, and the more that you overspend, the more support maintenance you're going to accumulate over those years. And the biggest consequence of all, if you get an unplanned visit from Oracle or OMS or Coles, then there could be an emergency spend or plan to get into that situation. I think the biggest consequence of all of not understanding your assets or not being able to manage them is that you're going to be dependent on the Oracle salespeople, business development people, to tell you what your assets are, or to describe to you what the rights of usage might be. And I've always referred to before that might not be the best source of information, given that where they're coming from and where you might be coming from. But if you have any questions around your license agreements, then reach out to your local BDMs for Software One, raise the questions in confidence with them, and we'll be happy to explore any issues that you might have. So, second part of the webinar really is I'm not controlling my assets, or I might be controlling them. What's the consequences? Well, a license audit or a review, as Oracle like to euphemistically call it, it could be precipitated from many areas really. It doesn't have to be the fact that Oracle have just turned up to audit you because they're looking to help you maximise your investment, as they again euphemistically call it. It could be precipitated from a number of areas, but the most obvious one is Oracle Server Worksheet from Oracle requesting information on your estate to give them a view of what you've actually got installed, which they're going to obviously compare to what you've actually bought. But there could be other reasons. You might want to strategically review your estate, maximise your investment, see whether you can move assets to other areas of the globe if you're a global business, or even actually retire old assets and buy new assets is also quite a good approach as well, because of the way that the product set's changed over the years. Or you simply do not know what position you're in, and you've been given the beautiful task of managing your Oracle estate, and now you're the software asset manager for Oracle. All of these can precipitate some form of review. But the process really is very much the same regardless of what you're doing. You need to set a time window to achieve this. You need to set a baseline from where you're starting. There could be pressure from Oracle. We advise clients how to deal with that. And you know, if you're in the process of an Oracle review at the moment and you would want advice on that, then reach out to us. But there could be time pressure because it's an acquisition or divestiture. Mergers and acquisitions are quite a common reason why clients might actually want to understand their Oracle estate. But in either case or all cases, why are we doing this? Is there going to be a financial outcome? Are we looking at support, redundant products, a compliance issue? Is it an administration issue because you have to submit to internal audit the process that you're going through in terms of being compliant around your software? And how are we going to get that information? Well, support renewal spreadsheet from Oracle is not good enough. It doesn't necessarily always capture all your entities that you manage for. It doesn't necessarily capture products which you're no longer paying support on, obviously, which you still might have perpetual usage rights. And that can cause conflict further down the line, but I'm not going to go into too much detail on that at the moment. But there are issues around support on product families within Oracle, which might only be precipitated by you buying a new product. And it also will not necessarily show you the details of what your usage rights are or grants of license, because without the contracts and the license agreements I mentioned earlier, the support schedule is purely a support schedule. And as I mentioned earlier, a database is a database, but you might have different grants of rights. So let's go back to that one again. I buy a database in the UK for UK usage. I can't ship that database to a data center in Germany. I buy a database in Germany with worldwide usage. I can ship that wherever I like in the globe. The consequences can be quite expensive. You haven't worked that one out. So have we got all our contracts? Have we got our license agreements, whether it's a license old OSA or whether it's a new OMA? What are my discovery tools going to be? Have we got methodology? Am I going to use iEquate or Flexera, which has some teams use, or am I going to use Line, which again has some team use? Am I going to use DBAs to get the information? And what further information might be available to Oracle from Oracle if I haven't got all my details to hand? Well, you can get information from Oracle. All your contracts are scanned, so it's pretty easy to get it now. And when I'm doing this process, okay, we've drawn a timeline, but what other factors do I need to push in? We should always look at what we wish to decommission and also look at future rollouts or anything to do with merger or acquisitions. And the reason for that, of course, is that if I am going to decommission software in a year's time, is the capability to put that into legacy, remove support. If I can take that off contracts, I can make savings there. If I'm going to buy something in a year's time, is there an opportunity then to restructure my support contracts? Because every time you buy something with Oracle, there's a process which allows us to go through approvals to get special terms and conditions. So set out your project plan. Think about how we want to engage with Oracle. The most important one there, I think, is when, as opposed to who, what, where, and why, but they're all very important. And think about your Oracle relationships. One of the outcomes of the review, whether it's precipitated by yourselves or by Oracle, is it's an opportunity to maximize your Oracle relationships. I mean, it might not seem like that when we enter an audit process because it's usually very tense, but if there is a compliance issue at the end, or is there a transaction at the end, it's the time to drive the maximum non-transactional opportunities for your business as well, in terms of relationships, special terms and conditions, help and advice, business input, etc. What is relevant to your business, you can find out at the time, but always bear that in mind. It's not purely a transactional issue. So where do we start? Just very briefly now, we're coming to a close. If we're looking at an Oracle Server worksheet, I often get asked this question, so just briefly show it. In very simple terms, it might look like this. Now, the important thing about this is that Oracle will take this sheet and then expand on it from question and answer session, or maybe from their script files that will run across the across your estate. But they're not on your side, so they're going to assume potentially the worst case scenario. So if you fill in our server worksheet, you probably ideally want to fill it in by using the tool. So I'll give you an example of sort of detail that you get on a tool, and you can have a look at it in a bit more detail when you get the slide set through from Dave later. But you see, there's a lot more detail. So instead of Oracle making assumptions from its script outputs, you're actually controlling the information that you're delivering back to Oracle. And the biggest message of all that we want to give to our clients really is that at some point you might have to fill in a Oracle Server worksheet as a self-declaration. It's part of your license agreement that you will comply with a review request from Oracle. But if you're going to fill in the information, there's only any value from your perspective filling the information if you understand what you're actually sending back to Oracle. So it's the old computer adage of garbage in, garbage out, and it's no different from your Oracle Server worksheet. If you put garbage in, you're going to get a garbage report back in terms of compliance. So be wary is probably the message. And if it goes wrong, it can go disastrously wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have to pay out money. There's always a negotiation. But if we took this case here, we had a client a few years ago that overspent by $1.5 million. Consequences of overspending by $1.5 million is that your support rebill a year is going to be 22% of that. And over 3 years, you're talking around in the region of around about $900,000. So 22% roughly, you're talking about $300,000 plus a year, $900,000 over 3 years. They've underspent as well. Settlement for Oracle was about 580, I think, at the time, maybe 560. And if we took 22% of 560, we'd end up with around about 112,000 or something like that a year. So 3 years at 110,000, keep the numbers round, we end up with 330. Add that on to 560, we're around about 900,000 again. So you can see that's how we get to the 3-year investment. So if instead of overspending on redundant product, in 3 years this client recovered their money by settling with Oracle and now having a reduced support fee of $110,000, and they've saved themselves $330,000 less $110,000 a year in support fees. Pretty substantial. I've seen bigger numbers, I've seen lesser numbers, but they sort of match mid-market figures. So let's take control of the situation. We find it very difficult to get clients to invest up front, but from a business case point of view, you can see that there are opportunities to drive substantial savings, which could then be delivered back to the business to justify taking control in advance rather than waiting until the vendors come in. And given that numbers where regardless of vendor can be quite large, these are the areas that we tend to see changes in the value that we drive from the process. So we can see that things like the appraisal license optimization, reconciliation, reharvesting of assets, particularly redeployment of assets, can create substantial savings from the business. And these are just not purchasing savings, these are dramatic savings in the support and maintenance that you're going to be paying on your contracts. So basic steps: have a SAM process, centralize your procurement, think about contract negotiation, and if we're getting more advanced beyond consolidation optimization, which quite often just means putting a lot of database on one server. Think about your 1 to ideally 3-year roadmap, but in the current business climate, we're probably looking at 12 to 24 months ahead. Think about what your IT strategy is for Oracle. Think about how you can manage your Oracle across that timeline, and understand the consequences of what your IT strategy might deliver to you in terms of compliance as well. So I think it's fairly well known now that people who've decided on a VMware strategy are looking to the best way to optimize Oracle within those environments. You go back 4 or 5 years, people walk blindly into the VMware strategy without understanding the licensing consequences. But even today, even as last week, I've spoken to 2 clients who've decided to spin up instances of Oracle in a VMware farm without understanding the consequences. It's all about maximizing the best for your business, and to put the sales pitch on the back end of this, really, we drive what we call the SPM model in terms of delivering this for our customer. So any of these steps that we're talking about fit within the SPM matrix, and it's all about sweating your assets in simplest terms. So in summary then, just before I hand over to David, your Oracle state, what's the current understanding? You need to have a continuous review and steps in place should Oracle approach you. The steps in place are covered really, which is to have a plan of how to manage and exit that engagement. The strategy for vendors, which SAM and procurement, should be joined up, and the Oracle relationships, don't forget them. Who's engaging with you from Oracle, what's their motivation, and when we exit a review with Oracle, understand how we can work those relationships to gain the maximum from investment in the vendor. So very brief overview. Any questions that you want to take in private, please contact your account manager or ourselves, but we just open the floor now for some general questions. And just to repeat, I think David will do that. If you want to get into more detail about what the contracts are about, the license agreements, then plug into our Part 2 webinar where we go into some more detail rather than just a sort of glossy overview.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob. So let's open up the questions. In fact, the first question is, can I have a copy of the presentation? So we will indeed be sharing the slides afterwards, so you can review them and obviously share them with colleagues as well internally to support your management of your Oracle. So on to question 2 that we've got come through is, my company runs a lot of Oracle applications, including Siebel. What should I be considering in terms of managing my licenses?
Right. I think in terms of managing licenses, it's there's 2 different approaches. The technology management is very much server orientated, so the process is quite often controlled by tools, and with the application licenses it can be much more user-based or enterprise-based. So in either case, as long as you have a process, and I've seen clients do this, you can actually do both manually. With the applications, particularly when we get into Siebel, it's quite difficult to manage that with a tool set. There are processes in some of the applications, such as e-business suites, where you can turn on triggers to understand the usage. Get into a bit of technical detail there, but all in all, the most important thing is, in terms of managing, is once you have a baseline, is to have an onboarding and offboarding procedure for your software, whether it's driven by some tool, SAM tool, or whether you're just simply doing it on a spreadsheet. I've seen quite large companies do this on a spreadsheet. Is as long as you've got a process for onboarding or offboarding, you can control quite tightly any changes in your estate.
Okay, thank you, Rob. So on to the next question we've had come in. What is the best discovery tool for Oracle?
Oh, good Lord. What's the best? Well, I suppose You have to go to our SAM team, I think, to ask that question. There's a cost against all of these tools. They all perform pretty well as far as I can see. They all perform in slightly different ways, and they all deliver not 100%. So you might need a mixture of tools in order to achieve the objectives according to your state. I mean, at the moment, we use all of them globally. Flexera, iQuake, we've used. We've got a preference for Align at the moment due to the fact that it seems to be easy to run proof of concepts across customers' estates, and they seem to have a better. And I'm afraid don't ask me the question about cost, but they seem to have a better cost model for engaging with customers. So it's not only what's the best, it's what's sort of cost effective. And one of the problems we have with tools, Dave, is that some of the tools, we know we might want to have a look at the state. Some of the tools can be quite prohibitive in terms of costs in order to just do that heads up, really.
Yeah, absolutely, and probably just to sort of paraphrase Rob, it depends. It's probably the old adage. So certainly something to probably follow up with our software asset management specialists who'd be able to provide a bit more detail and define what the objectives are of such a SAM engagement. Okay, so got another question in. What is the best way I can reduce my support fees?
Understanding how your estate's installed and then matching that up to your contracts. Oracle contracts now are notoriously difficult to pull apart to reduce your support fees. But if you've got a sort of long-term view of where you're going, let's say longer term, it might only be a year, it is possible then to manage new purchases and retire old assets, because you can drop a whole contract rather than having to have a partial contract dropped and then priced. If you're not buying anything at all in the future, you're looking at applications, you go to legacy, there's third parties, people who will support applications. In the database world, it gets a bit more difficult, but the thing to bear in mind from all of this, if you're buying something from Oracle and you're driving special terms and conditions, it's an opportunity for the Oracle sales guy to write an approval. As part of the approval, there's always a quid pro quo, is that you could get some benefit back from your business, and you're giving benefit to Oracle by giving them a transaction. So the most common thing I've seen recently from support reduction is really around applications where we're driving out without pricing contracts, we're driving out legacy products by supplementing them with some of the cloud products. It's quite a new thing for Oracle to do that over the last 6 months.
Okay.
A bit of a long answer, but
thank you, Rob. So we've currently got two more to run through at the minute. So can we add something on the Oracle script in order to fetch the deployment data, or is there only a default script?
So if you just run
so can we add something on the Oracle script in order to fetch the deployment data, or is there only a default script?
Well, your DBAs can script to bring out the information. If you want to run Oracle scripts, then by rights, only Oracle can do that, or their nominated partners, and that information is normally passed back to their team in Romania. The tools that we've talked about earlier use Oracle scripts, and Oracle verify those scripts are going to be bringing back the information. So they verify that the information might be okay, but they don't necessarily verify the information from compliance purposes. So I don't know whether that answers the question. If it doesn't, please drop us a mail, but that's how I understand the question to be first.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. And just seems to be our last question at the minute, which is, which information or input file is needed for any Oracle discovery tool, for example, SCCM for desktop environments?
There is, yes. If you go to enterprise manager, you're going to get similar information back from SCC as you get in SCCM. It's not fair asking an Oracle person Microsoft questions, but really that's why you're probably looking at third-party tools. The information available in the Oracle stack can be driven if you've got application DBAs and DBAs, but in order to really capture the information as per SCCM, but I think there's also a product called MAP, isn't there, that you use in Microsoft?
Yeah.
I think you're really looking at a third-party tool. Again, that's a conversation for our SAM guys, probably understanding a wee bit more about this state. But initially, coming back to what I said, start looking at the enterprise management option packs, which are available for technology and applications. And there are some other application tools which are very specific to, say, Business Suite, such as Config Snapshot, which will give you that sort of information as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rob. So I hope that's been able to address some of the questions there, and thank you again for your engagement on the call. And that really leaves us sort of time just to wrap up, really. So as Rob mentioned, if you do have any questions or things that you want to follow up in more confidential arena, then please use our email addresses that are on the screen. I will, of course, be sending out the slide deck from this morning's session. So again, feel free to contact me off the back of that, or indeed your Software One account manager, and we'll be there to support you. So thank you all for joining us today. I hope that's been valuable use of your time. Thank you, Rob, for taking us through the information.
My pleasure.
And we look forward to seeing you on future webinars. And actually, I will include the details of our second webinar on the email that will circulate the slide deck. So please feel free to join us on that one as well. Thank you very much, and goodbye.